I stared at the text message on my phone, my hands trembling so violently I nearly dropped it. The words blurred through my tears, but I had already memorized them. Mom says you're still moping around. Maybe if you'd been stronger, none of this would have happened. My sister Sarah's message felt like a knife twisting in a wound that had never healed. It had been 6 weeks since I buried my son Mike. 6 weeks since my parents walked away from me in that hospital corridor. And this was the first time any of them had reached out. Not to ask how I was doing. Not to offer comfort. But to blame me for my child's death. Something inside me clicked. Not broke. Clicked. Like a lock finally finding its key. If you've ever felt invisible to the people who were supposed to love you most, if you've ever been abandoned when you needed them desperately, then stay with me. This story gets dark before it gets better. But I promise you, it gets better. And before I tell you how I made them remember me, how I made them feel every ounce of pain they'd caused, I need you to do something for me. Hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel. And drop a comment telling me if you've ever been treated like you didn't matter by your own family. Because what I'm about to share with you, it's not just my story. It might be yours too. Let me take you back to where it all began. To the night my world ended. The fluorescent lights in the ICU burned into my retinas. But I couldn't close my eyes. Every time I did, I saw the seizure that had brought us here. Mike convulsing on the kitchen floor. His little body jerking. Foam at his mouth. His eyes rolled back, showing only whites. I had called 911. My voice barely working. My hands shaking so badly I could hardly hold him. The paramedics had arrived within 6 minutes. 6 minutes that felt like 6 hours. 6 minutes where I watched my baby boy slip away from me and couldn't do anything to stop it. That had been 72 hours ago. 72 hours of sitting in this uncomfortable plastic chair that had left permanent creases in my thighs. 72 hours of holding Mike's small, warm hand and pretending that warmth meant hope. 72 hours of watching monitors, listening to the rhythmic beeping that meant his heart was still beating. Even if his brain wasn't responding the way it should. Mike was 7 years old. Just 7. He'd been healthy his whole life. Never even a broken bone. The worst thing that had ever happened to him was when he fell off his bike last summer and scraped his knee so badly it bled through his favorite dinosaur Band-Aid. He'd cried then. But not for long. Mike was brave. Mike was strong. Mike was the best thing that had ever happened to me. He'd woken up that morning complaining of a headache. I'd given him children's Tylenol and kept him home from school. By lunch, he had a fever. By 3 o'clock, he was burning up at 104 degrees. I'd called his pediatrician, Dr. Morrison, who told me to bring him in immediately. But before I could get him in the car, the first Zeicher hit. The doctor said it was viral encephalitis, an infection in his brain. Rare, they said. Aggressive, they said. They'd pumped him full of antivirals, steroids, medications I couldn't pronounce. They'd induced a coma to give his brain time to heal. But it hadn't healed. The swelling had gotten worse. The scans showed more and more damage. I sang to him anyway. You are my sunshine. The lullaby I'd sung every night since he was born. My voice was hoarse now, cracking on every other word. But I kept singing. I needed him to know I was there. That he wasn't alone. That I would never, ever leave him. His little hand was so warm in mine. His chest rose and fell with the ventilator's rhythm. He looked like he was sleeping. Like any minute, he might open those beautiful brown eyes and ask me for pancakes. I'd called my parents that first night. My mother, Patricia, had answered on the 5th ring, her voice irritated. Eleanor, it's late. What is it? It's Mike, I'd said, my voice breaking. He's in the ICU. It's bad. Mom, it's really bad. Can you come? There was a long pause. Then, we'll be there in the morning. They'd arrived around 10 the next day. My father, Richard, looked annoyed at the disruption to his routine. Patricia had been perfectly dressed, as always. Her hair salon fresh, her nails manicured. They'd looked at Mike through the glass window of his room, expressed vague sympathies, and then retreated to the waiting area. They never came into his room, never touched him, never sat with me. We're here if you need us, Patricia had said. But she'd said it while scrolling through her phone, her attention already elsewhere. My sister Sarah hadn't come at all. She'd sent a text. Sorry about Mike. Can't make it. Busy with work. Keep me updated. That was it. No follow-up. No calls. Nothing. But I had expected that. Sarah had always been the golden child. The one who could do no wrong. The one who'd married the right man. Lived in the right neighborhood. Had the right career. I was the disappointment. The one who'd gotten pregnant at 22 by a man who disappeared the moment he found out. The one who dropped out of college to raise Mike alone. The one who worked 2 jobs just to keep us afloat in a tiny apartment that always smelled like the Thai restaurant downstairs. My parents had never forgiven me for Mike. For choosing to keep him. For disrupting their perfect family image. But I had loved that boy, with every atom of my being. He was funny and kind and obsessed with dinosaurs and space. He wanted to be an astronaut when he grew up. He'd already started learning the names of all the constellations. Last week, he'd pointed out Orion's belt from our apartment window and explained to me, with the seriousness only a 7-year-old could muster, that Betelgeuse was going to explode someday and we might be able to see it from Earth. I pressed my forehead against his small hand. Please come back to me. Baby. Please. I need you. You're my whole world. The machines beeped their steady rhythm. The nurses changed shift. Dr. Patel, the neurologist, came by every few hours with updates that weren't really updates. Nah change. We're monitoring him closely. We're doing everything we can. On the 3rd night, around 11:30, Dr. Patel came in with a different expression. I knew before he spoke. You develop that instinct in hospitals. The way they hold their shoulders, the way they won't quite meet your eyes, the careful, neutral expression that's supposed to be compassionate but just makes everything worse because you know what's coming. Miss Vance, he said softly. He pulled up a chair and sat down next to me. That was another bad sign. Doctors only sat down for the worst news. We've been monitoring Mike's brain activity very closely, and I'm afraid there's been no improvement. In fact, the swelling has continued to increase, despite all our interventions. My throat closed up, but his heart is still beating. Yes, the machines are keeping his body alive. But Ms. Vance, the scans show that there's been catastrophic damage to his brain. He's not going to wake up. I'm so sorry. I shook my head. No, you're wrong. He's warm. Feel his hand. He's warm. He's still here. The warmth is from his body's circulation. But his brain, the part that made Mike who he is, that's gone. We've done 3 separate EEGs. There's no activity. We've consulted with multiple specialists. I wish I had different news to give you. There has to be something else you can try. Another medication. A surgery. Something. Doctor. Patel's eyes were kind but firm. We've tried everything. I'm afraid at this point, we need to discuss next steps. You'll need to make some decisions about his care. I knew what he meant. He meant turning off the machines. He meant letting Mike go. He meant accepting that my son, my beautiful, brilliant, 7-year-old son, was never coming home. Can I have more time with him? Of course. Take all the time you need tonight. We'll talk more in the morning. He left. I sat there in the dim room, holding Mike's hand, listening to the machines breathe for him. I sang "You Are My Sunshine" over and over until my voice gave out completely. I told him stories about all the places we'd go together. I promised him we'd visit NASA. I promised him he'd get to see the stars up close. I promised him everything, even though I knew I was lying. Even though I knew he couldn't hear me anymore. Somewhere around midnight, I must have dozed off, my head on the edge of his bed, my hand still holding his Rady 7. I dreamed that Mike woke up, that he smiled at me and said, "Mom, I had the weirdest dream. I dreamed we went home, and everything was fine." The sound of the monitor woke me. The steady beeping had changed to something urgent, insistent. Dr. Patel rushed in with 2 nurses. I stood back, pressed against the wall, watching them work, watching them try to restart what was already gone. After 10 minutes, Dr. Patel stopped, looked at the clock. Time of death, 12:47 a.m. The machines went quiet. The room went quiet. Everything went quiet except for the sound that came out of me. A sound I didn't recognize. Somewhere between a scream and a sob and a howl. The sound of a mother's heart breaking. I don't remember falling, but I remember the cold floor against my cheek. I remember the pain in my chest, like something had physically torn open inside me. I remember pounding my fists against the linoleum, over and over, as if I could somehow beat my way through reality and find a different version where my son was still alive. Lena, one of the ICU nurses, knelt beside me. She didn't tell me to calm down. She didn't say it would be okay. She just put her arms around me and held me while I screamed. When I finally had no voice left, when my throat was raw and my eyes were swollen shut, I pulled myself up. I need to tell my parents. Lena helped me to my feet. They're in the waiting area. Do you want me to come with you? I shook my head. No. I need to do this. I walked down that corridor like a zombie. My legs didn't feel attached to my body. The fluorescent lights were too bright. Everything was too bright and too loud and too real. I wanted to wake up. I kept thinking I'd wake up. I found them at the end of the hallway. My mother, Patricia, was scrolling through her phone, her face pinched in annoyance at something she was reading. My father, Richard, was laughing into his cell phone, talking to Sarah. I could hear his end of the conversation. No. I think we should go with the Chilean sea base. It's better quality. Yes. The reservation is for 7:30 on Saturday. They were planning a dinner. While my son lay dead down the hall, they were planning a dinner party. I stood there for a moment, waiting for them to notice me. They didn't. I was invisible to them. Even now. Even in my worst moment. Mom? My voice came out as a rasp. I tried again. Louder. Mom? Dad? Patricia finally glanced up. Not with concern. With annoyance. Eleanor. What is it? You look terrible. He's gone. The words felt like broken glass in my throat. Mike is gone. He just died. My father covered the phone. Sarah, I'll call you back. He hung up and looked at me with the same expression he might have used if I'd told him the cable was out. Patricia sighed. Actually sighed. It was a long, put-upon sound. The kind of sigh you make when someone's telling you about a problem that's inconvenient but not really your problem. Well, I suppose it was bound to happen eventually. I stared at her. What? We knew it didn't look good. Eleanor. These things happen. I was starting to shake. My son just died. Your grandson just died. And that's what you have to say, these things happen. Patricia set down her phone. Looked at me with those cold blue eyes. You brought this on yourself. Eleanor. The hallway tilted. I grabbed the wall for support. My legs felt like they might give out. What did you just say? You heard me. This is the result of your choices. Did you really think you could raise a child alone? You can barely take care of yourself. You're working 2 jobs. Living in that awful apartment. Feeding him, God knows what kind of cheap food. No wonder the boy got sick. Something roared in my ears. You're blaming me for this. He had a viral infection. A brain infection. The doctor said there was nothing anyone could have done. Doctors always say that, Patricia said dismissively. But the truth is, if you'd made better choices, if you'd given him up for adoption to a proper family like we suggested, he'd probably be alive right now. Living in a nice house with 2 parents who could actually afford to take care of him. I lunged at her. I don't remember deciding to do it. But suddenly I was in her face. My hands gripping her perfect cashmere sweater. Don't you dare. Don't you fucking dare blame me for this. I did everything for that boy. Everything. I gave up my entire life for him and I would do it again 1,000 times. He was loved. He was so loved. Richard pulled me off her. His grip was hard enough to bruise. Control yourself. Eleanor, you're making a scene. A scene I whirled on him. My baby just died, and you think I'm making a scene. Where were you? Where have you been for the last 3 days? You sat out here scrolling through your phones while I watched my son die. You didn't even come into his room. Not once. Not once did either of you come in and sit with him. What would have been the point? Patricia was straightening her sweater. Her voice icy. The child was unconscious. It's not like he would have known we were there. I would have known I was screaming now. People were staring. Other families in the waiting area were watching us. I didn't care. I would have known that you cared. That you gave a damn about him. About me. But you don't, do you? You never have. Patricia stood up, gathering her purse. I've had quite enough of this. Richard. Let's go. Go! I grabbed her arm. You're leaving, right now, Mom. Please. Please don't leave. I need you. I've never needed you more in my entire life. Please just stay. Just for tonight. Just sit with me. Please. She looked down at my hand on her arm, like it was something dirty. Something contaminating her. Let go of me. Eleanor. Please. I was begging now. Tears streaming down my face. Please don't do this. I'm your daughter. Mike was your grandson. Don't just leave me here alone. Patricia yanked her arm away. You're used to being alone. Eleanor. You've always been alone. You've always preferred it that way. Haven't you? So independent. So determined to do everything yourself. Well, fine. Do this yourself too. I didn't prefer it, my voice cracked. I never preferred it. I've been alone because you pushed me away. Because I was never good enough for you. Because I embarrassed you by getting pregnant. But I never wanted to be alone. I've wanted you to love me my entire life. I've wanted you to be proud of me. To see me. But you never have. That's enough. Richard's voice was sharp. Eleanor. You're being hysterical. Go home. Get some rest. Pull yourself together. We'll talk when you're being rational. Rational, I laughed. It sounded unhinged even to me. My son just died and you want me to be rational. Patricia was already walking away. Richard followed her. I grabbed at them both, my fingers catching my mother's sleeve. Please. Please don't go. Don't leave me here alone. I'm begging you. Patricia turned back, and for just a moment, I thought I saw something in her eyes. Something almost like regret, but then it hardened. You'll be fine. Eleanor. You always are. You're tough. You don't need us. You never have. That's not true. I whispered. That's never been true. But they were already walking away. Down that long corridor with its terrible fluorescent lights and its smell of disinfectant and despair. They walked away and they didn't look back. Not once. I sank to the floor. Right there in the middle of the hallway. I curled into myself and sobbed. Great. Gasping sobs that hurt my ribs. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I couldn't exist in a world where my son was dead and my parents had just walked away from me. Lena found me there. I don't know how much time had passed. Could have been 5 minutes. Could have been an hour. She sat down on the floor next to me and pulled me into her arms. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. They left. I managed to say through my tears. They just left me. I know. I saw. What kind of people do that? What kind of parents leave their child when their child just lost their child? Lena didn't answer. There was no answer. She just held me and let me cry until I had nothing left. The next few days were a blur. I had to plan a funeral, pick out a casket, write an obituary. All the horrible logistics of death that nobody tells you about. The funeral home director was kind. He gave me a payment plan because I didn't have enough money. Mike's funeral was going to cost more than I made in 3 months. I called my parents to tell them the details. My mother answered. The funeral is on Saturday at 2. I said, my voice flat. Mount Hope Cemetery. I'll send you the information. We'll see if we can make it. Patricia said, Richard has a golf tournament that morning. A golf tournament. I repeated the words, trying to make them make sense. Mom, this is your grandson's funeral. Eleanor, we've been through this. We understand you're upset. But life goes on. We can't drop everything. I'm not asking you to drop everything. I'm asking you to come to your grandson's funeral. We'll see. She hung up. They didn't come. The funeral was 3 days later, on a gray Saturday that threatened rain. I'd chosen the smallest casket they had. White. With silver handles. It looked like something for a toy. Not a person. Not my son. There were 12 people there. Lena Kame. even though she barely knew me. A few of Mike's teachers from school, some parents from his class whose names I barely remembered, my landlord, Mr. Chen, who'd always been kind to us. That was it. No family, no parents, no sister. The minister was a stranger. I'd picked him from the funeral homes list because I didn't have a church. Mike and I hadn't been religious. But I wanted someone to say something. The minister talked about God's plan and eternal peace and all the empty phrases people say when they don't know the person who died. I didn't hear most of it. I just stared at that little white casket and tried to comprehend that my son was inside it, that I'd never hear his laugh again. Never watch him discover a new fact about space. Never make him chocolate chip pancakes on Sunday morning. The wind picked up during the service. It was cold, cutting right through my thin black dress, the only black dress I owned. I'd bought it at Goodwill the day before for $12. I stood next to the grave they'd dug, next to that absurdly small casket, and I felt nothing but emptiness. A vast, echoing emptiness where my heart used to be. After everyone left, I stood there alone. The cemetery workers were waiting to lower the casket, but they gave me space. I knelt in the grass, put my hand on the white wood. "I'm so sorry. Baby?" I whispered. "I'm so sorry I couldn't save you. I'm sorry you're alone now. I'm sorry for everything." The rain started then, cold drops that soaked through my dress in seconds. I didn't move. I knelt there in the mud and the rain, and let it pour over me, wishing it could wash me away too. Going home was worse. The apartment still smelled like Mike. His backpack was by the door where he'd dropped it last Monday morning, complaining about his math homework. His dinosaur toys were lined up on the shelf in the exact order he'd arranged them. Tyrannosaurus Rex at the front because he was the king. His favorite blanket was still on the couch, the blue one with the stars. The TV was paused on his favorite show, Wild Kratts, the episode about wolves he'd been watching before he got sick. I stood in the doorway and couldn't make myself go in. This apartment was full of Mike. Every corner held a memory. Every object was something he'd touched, something that mattered to him. How was I supposed to live here without him? How was I supposed to exist in a space he'd filled so completely? I finally forced myself inside, closed the door, locked it, stood in the middle of the living room, and looked around at my son's life, frozen in time. I picked up his blanket, held it to my face. It still smelled like him, like the strawberry shampoo he loved and the dirt he always managed to get on himself no matter how careful he tried to be. I didn't cry. I was beyond crying. I just stood there, holding that blanket, feeling the weight of every moment I'd never have, every birthday party he'd miss, every Christmas morning, every first day of school, his first crush, his graduation, his wedding, all of it, gone, erased, because of a virus that had attacked his brain for no reason, with no warning, giving us no chance to fight it. The days blurred together after that. I called into both my jobs and told them I needed time. They were understanding. Well, one was understanding. The other told me I had 3 days of bereavement leave, and then I needed to be back or find another job. I stopped answering the phone, stopped checking my messages, stopped eating, though Lena brought food by every other day and forced me to eat at least a few bites. I couldn't sleep in my bedroom. That had been too close to Mike's room. I couldn't be near his empty room, with his dinosaur posters on the walls and his books about space on the shelves, so I slept on the couch. Or I tried to sleep. Mostly I lay there in the dark and stared at nothing. When I did sleep, I dreamed about him. Good dreams that turned into nightmares when I woke up and remembered. Dreams where he was healthy and laughing, where we were at the park feeding ducks, where he was showing me the homework he was proud of. And then I'd wake up, and the apartment would be silent, and I'd remember all over again that he was gone. The first week passed, then the second, then a month. I went back to work because I had to. Bills didn't stop coming just because your world ended. I worked at a coffee shop in the morning and cleaned offices at night. I was a ghost moving through my own life. People tried to talk to me, asked me how I was doing. I learned to say I'm okay with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. I learned to function while dead inside. My parents never called, not once. Sarah sent a text 2 weeks after the funeral. "Just hope you're doing better." No phone call. No visit. Just those 4 words. Like Mike's death was something I should be getting over by now. 6 weeks after Mike died, I was sitting on my couch at 11 at night, staring at the TV without really watching it, when my phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. I almost didn't read it, but some masochistic part of me opened it. Mom says you're still moping around. Maybe if you'd been stronger, none of this would have happened. I read it once, twice, 3 times. Each time, something shifted inside me. The numbness that had been protecting me started to crack, and underneath it wasn't more grief. It was rage. Maybe if I'd been stronger, as if my strength could have stopped a virus, as if I hadn't been strong every single day of Mike's life, working 2 jobs, keeping us afloat, making sure he had everything he needed, even when it meant I had nothing. As if I hadn't been strong enough to raise him alone when everyone told me I should give him up. Strong enough to love him fiercely in a world that judged me for being a single mother. Strong enough to hold his hand and sing to him and tell him I loved him, even as he was dying. I looked around my apartment. At the shrine to grief I'd built. At Mike's toys that I couldn't bear to put away. At his blanket that I slept with every night. At the life I'd been living, or not living, for the past 6 weeks. And I thought about my mother's words in that hospital corridor. You're used to being alone. You've always been alone. They were right about one thing. I was alone. Completely alone. But not because I wanted to be. Because they'd left me that way. They'd abandoned me when I needed them most. Blamed me for my son's death. And now they were talking about me behind my back. Judging me. Criticizing me for grieving my own child. Something inside me clicked. Not broke. Clicked. Like a door unlocking. Like a decision being made at a level deeper than conscious thought. I stood up. Walked to the mirror in the bathroom. Looked at myself. I barely recognized the woman staring back. Hollow-eyed. Gaunt. Lost. But underneath that, something else was stirring. Something cold and focused. They weren't going to remember Mike. They'd never really acknowledged him in life. They certainly weren't going to honor him in death. They'd forget him completely, if they hadn't already. And they'd forget me too. Continue dismissing me. The disappointing daughter who'd made all the wrong choices. Unless I made them remember. Unless I made sure that the next time they heard my name, it wasn't with pity or contempt, but with something else entirely. I picked up my phone. Started searching for jobs. Not coffee shops or cleaning gigs. Something different. Something that would teach me what I needed to know. 2 days later, I was hired at Morrison & Sons Funeral Home. The pay was slightly better than my other jobs. And Mr. Morrison, the owner, seemed kind. But that wasn't why I took the job. I took it because funeral homes dealt with death every day. They dealt with grieving families. They dealt with legal documents, insurance, money, logistics. They saw people at their most vulnerable. And I needed to learn. I needed to understand how all of it worked. Because somewhere in the rage that was slowly replacing my grief, a plan was forming. It wasn't clear yet, but it was there. My first day at Morrison & Sons, I met the rest of the staff. There was elderly Mr. Tane, Morrison himself, who'd been running the place for 40 years. His son Marcus, who handled the financial side. And 3 other employees who did everything from greeting families to preparing bodies to arranging flowers. The work was somber but peaceful in its own way. I arranged flowers for services. I sat with grieving families and listened to them talk about their loved ones. I wrote sympathy cards in my careful handwriting. I helped prepare rooms for viewings, making sure everything was perfect. And I watched. I watched families grieve together. I watched parents hold each other and weep over their children. I watched siblings support each other. I watched what real family looked like when tragedy struck. It looked nothing like mine. I also learned about the business side. How much funerals cost. How insurance worked. How disputes over estates happened. How sometimes families fought over money, even before the deceased was in the ground. Marcus Morrison was a wealth of information. Always willing to explain things to me when I asked. "You're very dedicated," he told me one day. 3 months after I'd started. "Most people in this job get burned out quickly. But you seem to have a real calling for it." I didn't tell him I didn't have a calling. I had a purpose. And every day, That purpose was becoming clearer. I also started educating myself in other ways. I spent my evenings at the library, reading about law, about fraud, about how evidence was collected and presented, about what made a case strong, about how the legal system worked. I took notes. I memorized. I learned. 6 months passed. Then 8. Then 10. I was functioning now. Not just surviving. I'd packed away most of Mike's things. Though I kept his blanket and a few of his favorite dinosaurs, I visited his grave every Sunday, bringing flowers and telling him about my week. I was still alone. But I'd accepted that, even embraced it. Alone meant focused. Alone meant I could do what needed to be done without distractions. I hadn't spoken to my parents since the hospital. Not once. And they hadn't tried to reach out. It was like I'd ceased to exist for them. Like I'd been written out of the family story completely. Until the phone call. It came on a Tuesday morning, almost 11 months after Mike's death. I was at the funeral home, arranging white lilies for a service that afternoon. When my phone rang, Patricia Vance. My thumb hovered over the decline button, but something made me answer. Hello? Mother. Oh, you're still alive. Her voice dripped with sarcasm. I was beginning to wonder. What do you want? Your father is ill. He's been diagnosed with late-stage lung cancer. He's going to need help. Care. You need to come home. Home. As if I'd ever had a home with them. I see. And why should I do that? Because he's your father. Eleanor. Because it's your duty. My duty. I almost laughed. That's interesting. Coming from you. Where was your duty when Mike died? Where was your duty when I was planning his funeral alone? When I was grieving alone? Don't be melodramatic. That's in the past. This is about now. Your father is sick. He needs you. He needs me. I let the words hang in the air. Does he even remember my name? Does he remember Mike's name? Eleanor. I don't have time for your self-pity. Are you coming or not? Because if you're not, then don't bother ever contacting us again. I'll come, I heard myself say. When do you need me? This weekend. Saturday morning. Don't be late. She hung up without saying goodbye. I stood there, holding my phone, staring at the lilies I'd been arranging. They were for a 53-year-old woman who died of a heart attack, leaving behind a husband and 3 children who were devastated. The husband had sobbed when he came in to plan the service. Actually sobbed, unable to talk for minutes at a time. That's what real love looked like. That's what family was supposed to be. Everything okay? Marcus Morrison had come up behind me. My father is sick. Cancer. They want me to come help take care of him. I'm sorry to hear that. Do you need time off? Maybe. I'll know more after this weekend. He studied my face. You don't seem very upset. I looked at him. Marcus was younger than his father. Maybe late 40s. With kind eyes and an honest face. In the 10 months I'd worked here, he'd been nothing but good to me. Patient. Understanding. Fair. He'd even given me a raise after 6 months, without me asking. Would you be upset? I asked carefully. If the people who abandoned you when you needed them most suddenly demanded your help when they needed you. His expression changed. Understanding dawned. No, I don't think I would. Then you understand why I'm not crying. He nodded. If you need anything. Eleanor, you let me know. And I mean anything. I filed that away. Marcus Morrison might be useful. Later, Saturday morning, I drove to my parents' house for the first time in almost a year. It was in the nice part of town. A neighborhood with tree-lined streets and houses that cost more than most people made in 5 years. The kind of neighborhood where people had housekeepers and gardeners and 2-car garages. I pulled up in front of the house I'd grown up in. White colonial with black shutters, perfect lawn, perfect flower beds. Perfect facade hiding a deeply imperfect family. I sat in my car for a moment, gathering myself. I was wearing jeans and a sweater, my hair pulled back in a ponytail. No makeup. I looked tired because I was tired. But underneath that tiredness was something else, something sharp and focused that had been growing for months. I got out of the car and walked to the front door, rang the bell, waited. Patricia opened the door. She looked older, more drawn. but still impeccably dressed. Her hair styled, her jewelry expensive. "You're late," she said instead of hello. "It's 9:05. You said morning." "I meant early morning." "Never mind. Come in." The house was exactly as I remembered. Expensive furniture. Expensive art. Everything carefully curated to project wealth and taste. It had never felt like a home. Just a showroom. "Your father is in the living room," Patricia said, leading the way. "The cancer has spread. He's on oxygen. He can't do much for himself anymore." Richard was on the couch, looking nothing like the vigorous man I'd last seen. He was thin, almost huiletal. His skin had a grayish cast. The oxygen tubes in his nose made him look vulnerable in a way I'd never seen before. He looked up when I entered. "Eleanor, you came. You sound surprised." "I am. Frankly, didn't think you'd bother." I sat in the chair across from him. "I'm here. What do you need?" Patricia sat next to Richard. "We need someone to help. Meals, medications, driving him to appointments. The home health aide only comes 3 days a week. We need coverage the rest of the time. And Sarah can't do this because Sarah has a job, and a husband, and responsibilities. I have a job too, working at a funeral home. Hardly a career." "Eleanor." Patricia's voice was dismissive. I bit back my response. "How long are we talking about?" "The doctors say he has maybe 6 months. Maybe less." 6 months. I looked at my father. He wouldn't meet my eyes. I looked at my mother. She was staring at me with something like expectation, like she assumed I'd just fall in line, play the dutiful daughter, forget everything they'd done. "I'll help," I said slowly. "But I have conditions." Patricia's eyebrows rose. "Conditions? You're in no position to make conditions." "Eleanor. Actually, I am. You called me. You need me. So yes, I have conditions. I'll come 3 days a week. I'll help with whatever needs to be done those days. But I'm not moving in. I'm not dropping my life. And I expect to be paid." Paid. Richard's voice was weak but indignant. "We're your parents." "Yes. And when I needed you, where were you? When Mike died, where were you? You left me alone in that hospital. You didn't come to his funeral. You blamed me for his death. So no, I'm not doing this out of love or duty. I'm doing this as a job. And I want to be compensated." Patricia's face flushed red. "How dare you? After everything we've done for you. What have you done for me? Mother, please. Enlighten me. Because from where I'm sitting, you've done nothing but criticize and abandon me. We raised you, fed you, clothed you, sent you to good schools. You did the bare minimum required by law. And you made sure I knew every single day what a burden I was." Richard started coughing. "Avet." Rattling sound. Patricia glared at me. "Look what you're doing to him. You're upsetting him. I'm just speaking the truth. Finally, if you want my help, these are my terms. $20 an hour. 3 days a week. I'll be here from 9 to 5. I'll do what needs to be done, and you'll treat me with basic respect. No insults. No criticisms. No blame. If you can't agree to that, I'll leave right now and you'll never see me again." They looked at each other. A long, silent conversation passed between them. Finally, Patricia nodded. "Fine. $20 an hour. But you do everything we ask. Everything reasonable." I corrected. "I'm a caretaker, not a servant." "Fine." I stood up. "I'll start Monday. 9 a.m. Have a list ready of his medications and his doctor's appointments." I left before they could say anything else. Got in my car and sat there for a moment, my hands shaking slightly, not from fear, from anticipation, because now I had access, 3 days a week, unsupervised, in their house, 3 days a week to look for what I needed, because I knew, deep in my bones, that my father hadn't built his comfortable life, honestly. Men like Richard Vance, men who looked down on everyone else, who acted like they were better than people who struggled, usually had secrets. And I was going to find them. Monday morning, I arrived at exactly 9 a.m. Patricia answered the door with a list 3 pages long. These are his medications. These are his appointments. This is the meal plan from the nutritionist. He needs help bathing, but he's embarrassed, so be quick about it. He needs his oxygen checked every 2 hours. The tanks are in the garage. The home health aide left instructions. I took the pages. Scanned them. Where will you be? I have my book club. Then lunch with friends. I'll be back around 4. Perfect. And Sarah will visit on weekends. If she can. She's very busy. Of course she was. I watched Patricia leave. Then turned to Richard. All right, let's get you sorted. The first day was spent learning the routine. Medications at specific times. Meals that were soft enough for him to eat easily. Checking his oxygen saturation. Helping him to the bathroom. It was intimate work. Work that should have been done by someone who loved him. But I felt nothing as I helped him. He was just a job. A means to an end. Patricia came home at 4. Looked around critically. The kitchen is a mess. I've been taking care of your husband. If you want a maid, hire one. Her eyes narrowed. But she didn't say anything. She couldn't. She needed me. I left at 5 on the dot. But not before noting the layout of the house. Where things were kept. Which rooms were locked. Particularly, I noticed Richard's office door was always closed. Tuesday was the same. Wednesday, Patricia had an all-day event. I'll be gone from 9 to 6, she announced. You'll have to handle everything. That's 7 hours over my usual time. I'll need overtime pay. She looked like she wanted to argue, but Richard started coughing again. Fine. Whatever. The moment she left, I helped Richard with his morning routine, got him settled on the couch with the TV remote and his oxygen tank within easy reach. Made him a protein shake the nutritionist had recommended. And then I said, I'm going to clean the kitchen. Call me if you need anything. He waved me away. Already absorbed in some news program, I went to the kitchen, washed the dishes, wiped the counters, and then I walked quietly down the hall to Richard's office. The door was locked, as I'd expected, but I'd learned how to pick simple locks. One of the funeral home's storage closets had a tricky lock, and Marcus had shown me the trick. Apparently, his father had locked himself out often enough that they kept a pick handy. The lock on Richard's office was standard. Took me about 3 minutes to get it open. I slipped inside, closed the door behind me. The office was exactly what I'd expected. Big desk, leather chair, walls lined with shelves full of books that looked expensive but probably had never been read. I started with the desk. Carefully. I had maybe 2 hours before I needed to check on Richard again. The first drawer had office supplies. The second had files. Taxes. Insurance. Medical records. I photographed each document with my phone, keeping everything in order so I could put it back exactly as I'd found it. The third drawer was locked. That took longer to pick. But when I got it open, I knew I'd found something. Inside was a leather-bound notebook, the kind with expensive paper. I pulled it out carefully. My father's handwriting filled the pages. I started reading, my heart beating faster with each line. They were financial transactions, loans he'd made to people. But as I read further, I realized these weren't normal loans. These were predatory. He'd lent money to people who were desperate, then charged them exorbitant interest. When they couldn't pay, he'd taken their collateral. Houses, cars, savings. And all of it was documented here, in his own hand. I recognized names. The Hendersons, our next-door neighbors. The Thompsons from church. The Martinez family, who'd trusted Richard with their retirement savings to invest for them. He'd lost it all in bad stocks and never told them, and just kept sending them false statements showing gains that didn't exist. I kept reading. There were at least 30 people here. 30 families he'd defrauded. And the amounts weren't small. Hundreds of thousands of dollars. Total. And then I got to the last few pages. Notes about me. Eleanor. Useless as always. The girl has no sense. Should have pushed harder for adoption. The bastard child was always going to be a problem. The funeral bill will teach her a lesson about responsibility. I read that last line 3 times. The funeral bill will teach her a lesson. He'd known I could barely afford Mike's funeral. He'd known I was drowning in debt from it, and he'd viewed it as a teaching moment. As my punishment for existing, for having a child, for needing help. I sat there at his desk, that notebook in my hands, and I felt the last piece of my grief transform into something else entirely, into purpose. Cold, focused purpose. I photographed every single page of that notebook, every transaction, every name, every note. When I was done, I put it back exactly where I'd found it, relocked the drawer, relocked the office door, went back to the kitchen and finished cleaning. When Richard called me an hour later, I went to him with a smile. Need something. Bathroom, he muttered. I helped him up, supported his weight, got him to the bathroom and waited outside. Helped him back to the couch, got him more water, checked his oxygen, did everything a good caretaker would do. Patricia came home at 6:15. How was he today? Fine. No problems. He ate well. Had a good nap. She looked around suspiciously, like she thought I might have stolen something. But everything was in place. Everything was perfect. Well, good. Same time tomorrow. See you Monday. I don't work Thursdays or Fridays. Remember. Right. I drove home with my phone full of evidence burning a hole in my pocket. I didn't go straight home, though. I went to a print shop, printed out every photo, 3 copies of everything. One set I put in a safety deposit box I rented that day. One set I kept in my apartment, hidden in a box of Mike's things. And the third set, I started working with. I made a list of every person Richard had defrauded. Then I started researching them, where they lived now, if they were still in the area, if they seemed like they'd be willing to take action. It took me 3 weeks to finish the research. 3 weeks of going to my parents' house 3 days a week, playing the dutiful daughter, helping my dying father, all while knowing exactly what kind of man he was. 3 weeks of smiling at my mother while she criticized everything I did. 3 weeks of planning. Marcus Morrison noticed the change in me. You seem different, he said one day. Lighter. Somehow. I'm just working through some things. I told him. Anything I can help with. I looked at him. Really looked at him. And I made a decision. Actually, yes. Do you know any good lawyers? The kind who handle fraud cases? His eyebrows rose. That's an interesting question. What kind of fraud? Financial. Multiple victims. Someone who's gotten away with it for years. He studied my face. Is this about your father? Does it matter? No. I suppose it doesn't. He thought for a moment. There's a lawyer named Marcus Thorne. Yes. Same first name as me. We joke about it. He's a bulldog. Specializes in white-collar crime. Fraud. That sort of thing. He's not cheap. But he's good. Really good. Could you introduce us? Are you sure you want to do this? Going after your father while he's dying? I'm going after him because he deserves it. The cancer doesn't change what he did. It doesn't erase the people he hurt. Marcus Morrison nodded slowly. All right. I'll set up a meeting. 3 days later, I was sitting in Marcus Thorne's office. He was exactly what Morrison had promised. Sharp suit. Sharper eyes. An air of competence and controlled aggression. He listened to my story without interrupting. Looked through the copies of the notebook I'd brought. Asked pointed questions. This is solid evidence, he said finally. Really solid. With this, I could build cases for fraud, embezzlement, potentially even racketeering depending on how he structured some of these transactions. The question is, what do you want out of this? I want him to pay. I want everyone he hurt to know what he did. I want there to be consequences. And for you personally, because typically in cases like this, family members who blow the whistle sometimes get a percentage of recovered funds. I don't want money. I want justice. He leaned back in his chair. All right. Here's what I propose. You let me contact these victims. I'll be discreet. I'll offer to represent them. Once I have enough of them on board, we file charges. Criminal and civil. Your name can stay out of it entirely. If you want, I'll say an anonymous whistleblower provided the information. How long will this take? A few months to contact everyone and build the cases. Maybe another few months to go to trial. Depending on how it plays out, Your father is dying. You said. They gave him 6 months. That was 2 months ago. Then we need to move fast. The justice system doesn't stop for death, but it's better if he's alive to face the consequences. Do it. We shook hands, and with that handshake, I set in motion the destruction of my parents' entire world. I kept working for them, 3 days a week, 9 to 5, helping my father die. It felt surreal, knowing what I'd done, knowing what was coming. But I maintained my role perfectly, the dutiful daughter, helping despite their past mistreatment. Patricia even warmed to me slightly. In her own cold way, "You're more competent than I expected," she told me once. High praise. From her, Sarah visited a few times, breezed in, stayed for an hour, left again. She barely spoke to me, and I didn't make an effort. She was irrelevant to me now. A ghost from a family I no longer belonged to. 6 weeks after I'd met with Marcus Thorne, the first letter arrived. I was there when it came. I just helped Richard with his lunch when the doorbell rang. Patricia answered it. A courier with a certified letter. "Richard Vance," the courier asked. "I'll sign for him," Patricia said. She brought the envelope into the living room. "It's from some law firm, Thorne Associates." Richard's face went pale. "Well, Pali. Open it." Patricia did. I watched her face as she read, watched the color drain from it, watched her hands start to shake. "Richard," she whispered. "It's from the Hendersons. They're suing you. For fraud. They say they have evidence of predatory lending. They say you stole their money." Richard's eyes went wide. He tried to speak, but all that came out was a cough. "This can't be right," Patricia said. But her voice was uncertain. "This has to be some kind of mistake." I kept my face carefully neutral. "I should probably go. This seems like a family matter." "No," Richard gasped. "Stay. I'm going to need help." Over the next 2 weeks, more letters came. The Thompsons, the Martinez family, the Johnsons, the Lees. Name after name from that notebook. All of them represented by Marcus Thorne. All of them suing Richard for fraud. Then the criminal investigation started. The district attorney's office got involved. Apparently, Marcus Thorne had presented them with such compelling evidence that they had no choice but to investigate. The police came to the house. I wasn't there that day, but Patricia called me. Her voice panicked. "They're taking all of Richard's files. They have a warrant. Eleanor, you need to come. I need help. I'll be there tomorrow. That's my next scheduled day. Tomorrow, I need you now. I have other obligations today. Mother, I'll see you tomorrow." I hung up, and I smiled. Really smiled. For the first time since Mike died, I felt something like joy. When I arrived the next morning, the house was in chaos, papers everywhere. Patricia was on the phone with a lawyer. Richard was in bed, looking worse than I'd ever seen him. "Eleanor," he rasped when I entered his room. "You need to help me. This is all a misunderstanding. These people are lying." I sat in the chair next to his bed. "Are they?" "Of course they are. I never did anything illegal." "Really? So that notebook in your desk? The one with all those transactions? That's all legitimate." His eyes went wide. "How do you know about that?" I smiled. "I found it. About 2 months ago, when you thought I was just cleaning the kitchen." He stared at me, understanding dawning on his face. You did this. You gave them that information." "I did. How could you?" "I'm your father. I'm dying. You're my father who left me alone when my son died. Who blamed me for his death. Who called his funeral my punishment." "Yes. I read that part too. So yes." "Richard, I did this. I sent your victims the truth about what you'd done to them. And now they're making sure you pay for it." His breathing was labored. "You vindictive little bitch. Maybe. Or maybe I just learned from the best. You and Patricia taught me that family doesn't matter. That people are just tools to be used. Well, I used what you taught me." "Patricia," he yelled. Or tried to. It came out as more of a croak. "Patricia." She rushed in. "What's wrong? Do you need more oxygen?" She did this, Richard pointed at me with a shaking finger. Eleanor. She's the one who gave them the information. She's destroying us. Patricia turned to look at me. I met her eyes calmly. Is that true? Yes. For a long moment, she just stared at me. Then she slapped me. Hard. The crack echoed in the room. My cheek burned, but I didn't react. Just kept looking at her. Get out, she hissed. Get out of this house and never come back. Gladly, I stood up. But just so you know, the authorities are freezing your accounts. All of them. The civil suits are going to take everything you own. Richard will likely be in prison. If he lives long enough to go to trial. And Sarah's perfect life is about to become very complicated when everyone finds out her father is a criminal. You're destroying your own family. Patricia's voice was shaking. Do you understand that everything we built, everything we worked for, you're taking it all away? Everything you stole. You mean, everything you built on other people's backs? I'm not taking anything. I'm just making sure you finally pay for what you've done. I walked to the door, then turned back. Oh, and Mother. When you said I was used to being alone, you were right. But the thing about being alone is that it makes you strong. Stronger than you ever imagined. Strong enough to do this. I left, walked out of that house for the last time, got in my car and drove away, and I never looked back. The next few months were chaos for them. From what I heard through the local news and occasional updates from Marcus Thorne, Richard was indicted on 17 counts of fraud. He died before the trial. At home, with only Patricia there. The civil suits continued against his estate. Everything they owned was seized. The house, the cars, the investments, all of it. Patricia had to move into a tiny apartment. Had to get a job for the first time in her life. At 63 years old, she ended up working as a receptionist at a dental office. Sarah's life imploded too. Her husband divorced her. Not wanting to be associated with the scandal, she had to sell her house. Move to a different state to escape the whispers and the judgment. Patricia tried to call me a few times after Richard died. I never answered. She sent letters. I returned them unopened. Sarah tried too. Once. Sending me an email that I deleted without reading. I felt nothing about any of it. No guilt. No satisfaction. Just a sort of peaceful emptiness. Like a debt that had been paid. I kept working at Morrison and Sons Funeral Home. Marcus Morrison. The one who'd helped me. Never asked about what happened. He just treated me the same as always. With respect and kindness. A year after Richard died, I decided to leave town. Too many memories here. Too much pain. Even if I'd gotten my revenge, I needed to start completely fresh. I found a little town on the coast. Tourist season. A place where nobody knew me or my story. I rented a cottage 2 blocks from the beach. Close enough to hear the waves at night. I got a job at a flower shop near the harbor. The owner was an older woman named Rose. Ironic, given her profession. Who hired me without asking too many questions. The town was peaceful. Quiet. The kind of place where people minded their own business but were friendly if you wanted company. I didn't want company. Mostly. I worked. I walked on the beach. I visited Mike's grave every month, making the 3-hour drive back to lay flowers and talk to him. I did it. Baby, I told him on one of those visits. I made them pay. I made them remember you. Remember us. They lost everything. Just like we did. Is that wrong, maybe? But it was necessary. For me, for you, to prove that we mattered. That we weren't nothing. The visits got easier over time. The pain dulled from a sharp, constant ache to something softer. More like sadness than agony. I could think about Mike without falling apart. Could remember his laugh. His endless questions. His love for dinosaurs. Without being destroyed by grief. In my new town, I made a few friends. Not close ones, but casual acquaintances. Rose from the flower shop. A regular customer named Helen who came in every Saturday for tulips. A guy named David who worked at the coffee shop and always made my latte extra hot the way I liked it. I started to live again. Not the life I'd planned. Not the life I'd wanted. But a life nonetheless. On the first anniversary of Richard's death, Patricia showed up at my door. I don't know how she found me. Maybe Sarah hired a private investigator. Maybe they'd been keeping tabs on me all along. I opened the door, and there she was. Looking old and tired and broken. Nothing like the polished, perfect woman who'd walked away from me in that hospital corridor. "Eleanor," she said. "Can I come in?" "No. Please. I need to talk to you. There's nothing to say. There's everything to say." Her voice cracked. "Please. 5 minutes." Against my better judgment, I stepped outside, closing the door behind me. We stood on my little porch, the sound of seagulls in the distance. "I lost everything because of you," Patricia said. "No. You lost everything because of Richard. Because of the choices you both made. We were your parents. You destroyed us. You destroyed yourselves. I just made sure everyone else knew about it." She looked at me with tears in her eyes. Real tears. Was it worth it? All this hatred, all this anger? Was it worth losing your family? I didn't have a family. Not really. I had people who shared my DNA, but didn't love me. Didn't support me. Didn't even acknowledge me when my son died. So yes, Patricia, it was worth it. "I came to apologize," she said quietly. "For what we did. For what we said. For leaving you alone that night. 2 years too late. I know. But I'm saying it anyway. We were wrong. I was wrong. I should have stayed. I should have held you. I should have been your mother." I looked at her. Really looked at her. Saw the regret in her face. And felt absolutely nothing. "Thank you for the apology. But it doesn't change anything. It doesn't bring Mike back. It doesn't undo the damage. You made your choices. I made mine. Now we both have to live with the consequences. I've lost everything," she whispered. "Richard is dead. Sarah won't speak to me. I have nothing and no one. Now you know how it feels." She flinched like I'd struck her. "You've become cold. Eleanor. Hard. That's not who you were." "No, I've become strong. Exactly like you told me I should have been. Remember, maybe if you'd been stronger. Well, Mother, you got stronger. This is what strength looks like." She stood there for a moment longer, then turned to leave. At the edge of my porch, she stopped. "You'll regret this someday. This coldness. This isolation. You'll die alone. Just like you've made me." "Maybe," I said. "But at least when I die, I won't be pretending I was ever loved by you." She walked away, got into an old sedan. Nothing like the luxury cars she used to drive. And left. I went back inside. Made myself tea. Sat by the window watching the sunset paint the sky orange and pink, and I felt at peace, because I had done what I needed to do. I had made them understand. Made them feel the loss, and the pain, and the emptiness. Made them remember Mike. Even if it was only through their own suffering. Was it healthy? Probably not. Was it right? That wasn't for me to judge. But it was necessary. For my survival. For my sanity. For my son's memory. I never saw Patricia again after that day. I heard through the grapevine that she moved away. Back to the town where she'd grown up. Where maybe someone still remembered her as something other than the wife of a criminal. So let me ask you this. Have you ever had to walk away from family to save yourself? Have you ever been told your pain didn't matter? That you should just be stronger? Just get over it. And if you did walk away, do you regret it? Or like me, did you finally find peace in the distance? Drop your story in the comments. Hit that like button if this resonated with you. Subscribe because I share more stories like this. Stories about people who refused to be victims, who took their power back. And remember, sometimes the strongest thing you can do is walk away from people who make you feel small. Even if they're family, especially if they're family. Your worth isn't determined by how they treat you. It's determined by how you treat yourself. And I finally learned to treat myself with the love they never gave me. Thank you for listening to my story. I'll see you in the next one.